The Detroit Pistons finally won a basketball game, but what's going on with Jalen Duren and Tobias Harris? We're going to talk about all of that and more on this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, brought to you by Bleed. Let's get it.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting night of NBA basketball.
The Pistons are digging in. They got the depth. They got the big men. They got the better basketball team. No doubt about it.
Pistons need a three, and they have just under 3 seconds to do it. Here's Chauncey Billups. Here it is. He's got it. He's got it. Chauncey Billups hits the three. Overtime. Amazing.
Out of bounds. Detroit basketball.
Pistons fans, welcome back to another edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, brought to you by Bleed. It's myself, Aaron Johnson, and joining me is Jasper Apollonia. We're finally talking about a Detroit Pistons win. I want to get into that. There's some other topics that we've got to talk about, from Tobias Harris's slow start to the season to what's going on with Jalen Duren. We're going to talk about all that and more. But first off, Jasper, how we doing after a Pistons win on a victory Thursday?
Feeling good. I mean, look, the Pistons haven't beaten the Philadelphia 76ers since, oh my God, since when? Since the days of Blake Griffin? Is that how long it's been? It's been a long time, man. No Joel Embiid, no Paul George. Yes, there are some caveats, but let's be honest. This is a game last year they probably lose anyway. So it's nice to get that monkey off your back, so to speak, not just in regards to getting your first win, but also in regards to beating a team you've really struggled with over the last few years. So feeling very good, feeling positive. Still a lot of question marks around this team, around certain players. We will get into that, won't we?
We certainly will. We're going to talk about the game against Philadelphia in a lot of detail because it is that first victory of the year for Detroit. So for a team that really struggled to get that first one, I think it's worth definitely diving into. We're going to talk about some other things as well, as I mentioned. But before we get into it, I do want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Bet Online. Basketball fans, it's that time of year again. The NBA is back. From opening tip-off to buzzer beaters, Bet Online has you covered with the best odds, biggest promotions, and live in-game betting on all of your favorite teams. This season, every game matters. BetOnline has every stat, matchup breakdown, and live odds to bet on during the game. And it's not just the NBA. BetOnline has odds on everything from football, the now over MLB playoffs, NHL, and even political props. Head to the website today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline. The game starts here. Jasper, you've been betting the Pistons at all this year. Are there any angles that, I like to think at the beginning of the year, if you know your team, if you know the team that you're watching a lot, you might have a little bit of an edge on the sports books as they adjust to new players, new team situations, new coaching staffs. Is there any angle you've been betting on the Pistons so far this year that you've had any luck with? I'll say personally, I've loved targeting Malik Beasley. His points props have been really, really hittable. He's been at 7.5, 8.5. I've been targeting those a lot. I've played a lot of Cade Cunningham rebounds and assists types of stat combinations. So I think there's a lot of different angles to play for the Pistons. I've done a lot of various betting across the NBA this year. I love the beginning of the season gambling when it comes to basketball. But any angles you like or have liked so far this year?
Yeah, I've liked the Cade, props, points, rebounds, assists. Those have been good for me so far. Same with like Malik Beasley and Tim Hardaway Jr. Just take 2 threes, like get just some easy juice there because those guys are going to be shooting. I also think Jaden Ivey threes have been an underrated source of value there. He's shooting really well. I think that's something we'll probably talk about at some point today. But yeah, there's money to be made off the Detroit Pistons, as long as you didn't bet them the Pistons money line against the Miami Heat like I did the other day. Ruined my parlay. Oh well, c'est la vie is what it is.
I knew a number of people on that line. I just couldn't get myself to take that one.
Smart man.
But that's our gambling talk for the show. I know not everyone's on board with betting all the time. I'm one of the people that I love to gamble. I love to play the game, and I have a lot of fun with it. But we won't spend too much time talking about it right now. I do want to give one other shout out before we get into our topics today. Look, wherever you're watching or listening from right now, before we get into anything, just take 5-10 seconds to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the follow button, wherever you're watching or listening to the show from right now. It's going to really help us, and it's going to cost you nothing. So really need that support as we continue to grow the page. That stuff matters to get YouTube or to get Spotify or to get Apple Podcasts to recommend us to more podcast listeners, to more Pistons fans, so that we have more people watching or listening to the show. And that allows us to do more and more cool things, different types of coverage and things like that. So please, please, please take that 10 seconds to go find the subscribe button, leave us a 5-star rating, leave us a comment. All that stuff really, really helps. So appreciate that. If there's anything you want us to talk about on the show moving forward, let us know as well. You can put that in the YouTube comment section. You can tweet us, any of that stuff. So please take that time to do that. But I won't delay any further. Let's get into that first topic, and that's that first win of the season for Detroit. I think this was going to be a very, very different tone of a podcast had the Pistons not beaten the Philadelphia 76ers, but they do beat Philly minus Joel Embiid and minus Paul George. It wasn't a perfect game for Detroit, but they did pull away in the second half and held a firm grip on the game for the large majority of it. So they avoid the 0-5 start. That's the key right there. You get the monkey off your back. You get the first win, and it takes some of the tension off of you, especially with how the first 4 games went for Detroit, right? Some games where they were leading in the second half, where they were leading in the fourth quarter, and then it got down to that final 5 minutes of the game, and they just completely collapsed. So they finally get that win, takes that pressure off of them. They beat up on a banged-up Philly team without its 2 best players, but in the NBA, a win is still a win, and Tyrese Maxey was still on the court and was still a problem for the Detroit Pistons to handle.
Yeah, no question. I mean, look, this is a banged up Philly team, yes, but it's still a Philadelphia 76ers team that has played relatively well without Joel Embiid and without Paul George. Very dangerous. Like Tyrese Maxey can go off on you at any moment. And, once he does that, then you're just looking at a total breakdown of your defense. Andre Drummond is a player that still can control the boards, cause havoc on the offensive glass. And I think the Pistons did a really good job of fighting back yesterday. I mean, that first quarter was really ugly. Pistons had 9 turnovers in the first half. And I think really what the key was for them, and it's something that they haven't been able to do in their other games this year, is in the third quarter, they cut down on their turnovers massively. Yes, they had 7 turnovers in the second half, but they only had 2 in the third quarter. And just being able to take care of the ball, being able to be efficient, being able to just run offense and not let the opposing team get out in transition, which has happened to them in every other game so far this year, being able to cut down on those unforced errors and avoiding giving the other team easy buckets was so big for them last night. I thought they really did a good job of that. And then in the fourth quarter, I thought they did a really nice job locking down defensively, hitting those timely shots to stop any potential runs. Another thing that they just have not done in their other games so far. I think of the Miami Heat game where they came into the second half and they actually had a lead, and they just were not able to hold on to it because they gave up way too many easy shots, way too many transition opportunities. They just gave the ball to Miami too many times. And I think you're just seeing like that is really the key to the Pistons being that frisky team that can steal a win off of a good team or even a mediocre team on any given night. That ability to just close out games is so crucial. That ability to hold on to the ball is so crucial because, look, this is a team that has some some talent on it, finally. And as long as you don't shoot yourself in the foot, you can win these games. That wasn't really a possibility last year because they just didn't have the players that could do it straight up. So yeah, I think it was an encouraging win for the Pistons. And I think more so than that, like it provides a blueprint to how they can succeed down the line as well.
Yeah, it was kind of an awkward win for Detroit. I mean, Jalen Duren plays under 11 minutes. He just, we're going to talk about him more later, but a poor start to the season that really peaked its head in that Philly game. 11 minutes, 6 fouls, just could not stay on the floor. In a way, it almost seemed like he was trying to foul out at times with just the absolute terrible decision making from him. And it's not like Cade Cunningham went off in this game. He had probably his worst stat line of the year, 22, 7, and 5, which if that's a bad stat line for Cade Cunningham, that's probably pretty good news. Jaden Ivey played well. They had to get 18 points, but they also had to get 14 rebounds from Tobias Harris. It's just like the game script really weird, but they get the job done. And one thing I noticed is JB Bickerstaff did not take out any of the starters or any of the players that played the majority of the game down the stretch, down those final minutes, even when it was a 15-point game in the final closing minutes. He kept all the guys on, and I think that for a team that's really struggled to close games, that was probably the right decision as they tried to build confidence, try to build late game IQ and chemistry. Like those things matter. So that was definitely something that stood out even after Philadelphia had pulled the plug and taken out Tyrese Maxey and Andre Drummond and their key players. So a win is a win for Detroit.
I will say I'm glad you noticed that as well, because I did. And I thought that there was a very purposeful reason behind that. Like, I thought it was JB Bickerstaff sending kind of a message that, we have to compete to the end every single game this year. And more so than that, I think also just giving the starters an opportunity to celebrate their win on the court. Like, I thought that was a very purposeful thing, and I really liked it as well. Like, obviously, if somebody twists an ankle, we're looking at it very differently, but I thought that the impetus behind it was purposeful and important at the same time. Like, that's the kind of message you want to be sending your team, I think, especially a team like this that has struggled to close out games in the first, four games of this year. So I really like that a lot.
And not to get away from talking about something that's good, because there hasn't been a whole lot of good for the Pistons to start the year, but we do have to talk about some things that have been hurting the Pistons, quite frankly. One of them, who actually had a decent game against the Philadelphia 76ers, but overall in the season has really struggled, is Tobias Harris. He was Detroit's marquee free agency signing, signed a 2-year deal. It's getting paid $26 million annually by the Pistons. And he's just had a really slow start to the year. 11 points per game, 37% from the field, 15% from the three-point line. That was one of the key attributes as to why the Pistons targeted him, was that he was a big forward that could give the Pistons some scoring and some spacing capabilities alongside Cade Cunningham. And he's kind of just been the exact opposite of that. The Pistons have talked in length about, he's deferring. He's trying to make sure everyone else is getting their touches and getting involved. And then the Pistons, these last few games, have kind of tried to force feed him and get him going. And it kind of worked against Philly. I mean, a lot of his buckets were wide open right at the rim. He didn't make a three-pointer in the game. He didn't really do anything one-on-one that stood out like, oh, he's finding his groove. He was just kind of spoon-fed some open shots and some layups, and that's good that he's converted on them, no doubt. But I think, quite frankly, the Pistons need a lot more from Tobias Harris. He's just not been good enough, and he's part of the reason why the Pistons are not 2-3, 3-2, but are 1-4. They have not gotten enough from the whole leader of the team alongside Cade Cunningham. He has said it. Cade Cunningham has said it. JB Bickerstaff has said it. Trajan Langdon has said it. Cade Cunningham and Tobias Harris are the two leaders of this team. And the Pistons, quite frankly, need a lot more from their leader in Tobias Harris.
No question. And they need more out of not just him, but Simone Fontecchio as well. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that Fontecchio has also struggled in a similar role to Tobias Harris. So it's not like they've had, other options that they can go to. I know people have been looking at the stat lines and going like, what the hell is going on with Tobias? I think if Simone Fontecchio was playing a little bit better, then perhaps they could have, made a little bit of an adjustment in those minutes just to start off the season, but it hasn't really been there. I think that, yeah, everything you're saying is correct. Like he didn't hit a three. That's definitely been a disappointment from him. Like we have just not gotten any sort of 3-point shooting from Tobias Harris through the first 5 games. That being said, I thought his contributions, particularly in the second half last night, were very important. And no, he didn't hit the three, but like he grabbed 7 rebounds in the second half. It was a big reason why they were able to out rebound the Philadelphia 76ers in the second half. That's also something they haven't been able to do this year. They've been getting killed on the glass in the second halves of games. And I think that has been another reason why they have, blown what I would consider to be winnable games against the Celtics and the Heat and even the Pacers as well. Like they've gotten beaten on the boards in the second half of these games. They've been turning the ball over too much. I thought that was really good. Like he didn't turn over the ball one time in the second half. He scored efficiently, 6 of 11. He went, 2 of 7 in the first half. He was really struggling. So I'm hoping that this is just one of those things where it's like, okay, we got Tobias Harris some easy buckets in the second half of that game. He started to feel a little bit more comfortable. He was able to pull down some boards. And that's something that you can look at as, okay, now we're building a little bit more of that confidence. We're getting him back more into what he is because we know what Tobias Harris is. He's a 3-level scorer. He wants to be able to finish at the rim. He wants to be able to, hit those mid-range pull-ups. And you want him to be able to shoot wide open threes. So 2 of the 3 things were working for him in the second half last night. I will take that. It's baby steps, but you're 100% right when you say they need more of that and they need more 3-point shooting from him if they are going to be successful this year, because it's been a rough ride so far.
You have to hope and you have to imagine that water's going to find its level at some point. This is a guy that over his career is going to get you 17 points a game. It's going to shoot, 37% or better from the 3-point line. It's going to help you on the glass. It's going to be able to score in some various ways. In some post-ups, doing a little bit off the dribble, attacking the basket, hitting the spot of 3-pointers. It just hasn't happened yet this year for him. And it's tough because he spent 5 years in Philadelphia. So it's understanding that there's a transitional period and it's him trying to get acclimated to a new system and to find his role in a team that, quite frankly, he said he doesn't want to disrupt. He wants to help, but he doesn't want to disrupt everything that's being built here. And he's not the vocal point. It's Cade Cunningham, it's Jaden Ivey, but he does play a key supporting role, and he just hasn't lived up to that bill yet. So you have to hope that that's going to level itself out and that shooting is going to come and that ability to score is going to come. But I just look at even how he looks with the basketball and the lack of confidence that he seems to have out there. He gets the ball. He's not looking to attack off the dribble. His post-ups aren't really going anywhere. And again, like that's just concerning. I think the Philadelphia game is certainly a step in the right direction, but it's definitely a key storyline for Detroit right now is getting Tobias Harris to find his footing, getting him comfortable, getting him confident, getting him shooting the ball, getting him to provide that spacing. The Pistons have gotten some really good spacing from Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, and then Malik Beasley and Tim Hardaway Jr., but there's no doubt about it that they're going to need more from others. Tobias Harris, Simone Fontecchio, even Isaiah Stewart is going to have to start hitting some 3-pointers here at some point. But again, I'll say this as we move on from Harris, a step in the right direction against Philadelphia. Probably the game that he would like to have figured out the most in terms of who he was playing against. There was definitely some added emotion there. I remember a point in the first half where he made a shot to, I think that was his second basket in 7 attempts. And despite the struggles, he just threw his hands up in the air and encouraged a Philadelphia crowd that had been booing at him every time he touched the ball to just start booing louder at him. So he was certainly feeding off the energy in that arena. He was getting booed the entire game. So if there was a game for him to figure some things out, I'm sure he was happy that it came against the 76ers. A guy that figured out absolutely nothing, though, against Philadelphia was Jalen Duren. 6 fouls in 11 minutes. We already mentioned it at the beginning of the show, but a complete non-factor. And on the season, look, Jalen Duren was one of the key storylines heading in. Was he going to put it together? Was he going to be able to give you what you needed defensively to continue to build around him as your defensive anchor in the middle and as your starting center in a contract season where he's looking at being able to sign a hefty deal in the summer? And right now, through 5 games, it does not look good. He's shooting the ball well from the field because essentially all of his baskets are dunks or second chance layups off of offensive rebounds, but he's got more turnovers to assists. He's really struggled defensively. Perimeter bigs have dominated him in terms of getting Duren in the pick and roll, Duren getting lost, Duren a step behind, the big popping and having a wide open 3-point shot. It's just been a really rough start for him. And that was just capped off by the Philadelphia game where he was completely invisible. And I can't help but look and be concerned at the start for Jalen Duren.
The Pistons have a legitimate issue at the center position right now because, Jalen Duren has not been good to start this year at all. He has been, I would argue, an active detriment to what the Pistons are trying to do out there. And it's very concerning to me that we are, 5 games into the season, now going on 6, and looking at, should Isaiah Stewart be starting at the center position? Because in my eyes, Isaiah Stewart is not a starting quality NBA center, despite what Troy Weaver might think. Power forward. But the point is, like, the Pistons are just not good with Jalen Duren on the floor this year. They are getting absolutely demolished defensively. He has the worst defensive rating of any starter on the team. They have a 118 defensive rating with him on the court. That's just bad. Like, that's straight up terrible. It's the second worst mark on the team behind Paul Reed, who played a whole 7 minutes in the first game, or second game. Yeah, that's it. Second game, I should say. Like, they have been unable to stop teams at the rim. Teams are shooting 65% within 5 feet of the basket when Jalen Duren is on the floor right now. Like, it's a layup line. It's a layup line. He's not any sort of a rim deterrent. And it's frustrating because when we talked about our concerns for Jalen Duren coming into this season, I think a big part of it was, okay, we know what he's going to give you on the glass. We know what he's going to be able to give you as a lob threat. What's he going to be able to do in terms of, interior defense, perimeter defense? The problem for me has been that he hasn't been able to do the things that he's been good at in the past at a high level this year either. Yes, he's been scoring efficiently, but he's not getting a high degree of lobs like every single game. That's just not something that he's been really effective at. They haven't been good rebounding the ball with him on the court. They are better rebounding the ball with Jalen Duren off the court than on the court this year. And that goes for the offensive glass as well. His offensive rebounding numbers are extremely poor when he's on the floor. And we've seen it in several games. We talked about the issue with them being able to rebound in the third, fourth quarter and being able to secure those boards in order to prevent second chance opportunities. I mean, how many times against the Heat and the Celtics did the Pistons force a miss and then give up the offensive rebound and the other team makes the shot? Like, those are just back-breaking possessions for you right there, because you need to be able to secure the defensive boards at the ends of games or you're going to lose. Like, straight up. That's just how the NBA works. And the fact that he's not able to rebound the ball, he's not able to control the boards at a high level right now. He's not keeping opposing teams off of the boards. It's really concerning to me. It really shows like a serious regression. I don't know if it's an issue of confidence. I don't know if it's an issue of them not having the guys out there who can help him rebound the ball as well. Like Tobias Harris had 14 rebounds last night. That was nice, but he's not somebody that's going to, control the boards on a nightly basis. That's just not going to happen. And I thought it was also telling that when Jalen Duren came out of the game, the Pistons did a better job team rebounding last night. That was something that was very apparent to me. With him off the floor, they rebounded better. I think that where they're at right now, Isaiah Stewart is not a long-term solution. And I'm interested to see where you fall on that side of the divide, because what Isaiah Stewart brings is tremendous energy. He brings a lot of effort. Those are things that when you're playing 29, 30 minutes a game for 80 something games, those are just going to dip. And if he's coming off the bench, that's great. But if he's your starter, I think you have some real issues there, because he's not a great rebounder. He's not a great rim protector. He's a rim deterrent, that's for sure. But offensively, I mean, how many passes have we seen go off of his hands so far this year? And JB Bickerstaff does not seem, willing to let him shoot threes at this point. Like, they really want him doing everything on the interior. Which, as a center, I can understand. You don't have a lot of other great rebounding options when you have Isaiah Stewart out there. So for me, I don't know if there's really a good answer for the Detroit Pistons at this point of time. I'm interested to see how you feel about that, Aaron.
Well, before we get to Stewart, because I definitely want to talk about him. What's the devil's advocate point of view with Jalen Duren? Is it simply that he's 20 years old, a new head coach? It's not like he's playing with a ton of great defenders on the court with him. There's Noah Thompson. Jaden Ivey's got a long way to go defensively. They're starting Tim Hardaway Jr. right now at small forward. He's 6'5". Tobias Harris is just an average defender. Like, is there anything that you can do to give him the benefit of the doubt? And I'm as critical of Jalen Duren as anyone. And I think this start of the season has been a huge problem, and it's played a huge factor in why Detroit's 1-4 instead of 3-2 or better. He's just not been good enough. And at the same time, yeah, he's 20 years old and he's still really young, but this is year 3. This isn't year 1. Like, he's got 150 plus games under his belt. He knows what it takes to play in the NBA. He knows what he needs to do. He knows where he gets exposed and how teams take advantage of him. So when is it going to be fixed? Because I saw a super high level of intensity from him in game 1 and in game 2, and it just completely has dipped off after that. And it's not just intensity. It's IQ. It's awareness. It's knowing, you can't pick up a ticky-tack foul when you're a guy that plays with a ton of physicality and is in line to pick up 3, 4, 5 fouls on a nightly basis. You can't pick up boneheaded fouls at the rate that Jalen Duren does. So I have plenty of concerns with him. The only leeway that I think you can give is, again, he's 20 years old. It's another new head coach. There are some difficulties there, but it doesn't take those excuses just don't cover the decision making that I'm seeing out there. The lack of energy that it looks like is being played with at times. So, my concerns with Duren are definitely there. It's only 5 games into the season. I don't know if I'm calling it a wraps on anyone after 5 games, but it's just been a really, really tough start for him.
I mean, for me, it feels like it's a different sport, but like talking about like Spencer Torkelson, for the Detroit Tigers, where you go, well, he's young. When the only argument you have in favor of a player is his youth, to me, that is automatically a huge red flag. That's something that was the whole thing with James Wiseman for a long time, where it's like, this guy does not pass the eye test. His analytic profile is horrible. What is the only thing he really has going for him is that he's a really good athlete with a great body, and he's young. To me, that's just a huge red flag, because look, Sar Thompson was young. He did fine defensively. Isaiah Stewart, as a rookie, was very young. He's 19 years old. Isaiah Stewart's not some grizzled vet at this point in time, but Isaiah Stewart was able to defend the rim, way undersized, just fine as a rookie. So to me, that's like the most dangerous kind of devil's advocate argument, is when you're looking at a guy who's now in his third year in the league and saying, well, he's young. Yes, there's a 40-point swing in the Pistons defensive rating when you swap him out for Isaiah Stewart, with the other four guys all being the same, none of them being incredible defenders. Like, nobody's going, oh boy, Tim Hardaway and Jaden Ivey, what a defensive duo you have on the perimeter. But the Pistons defense, when it's Isaiah Stewart out there, with that same other four guys, is defensive rating of 80. With Jalen Duren out there, it's a defensive rating of 120. Yes, the sample size is small, but the eye test backs it up. Like, that's just one of those things. And I bring it back to like a James Wiseman or a Spencer Torkelson, where you just go, the eye test is showing you that the results are not there. Like, it's not just the results, it's the process. It's the way that he's playing defense. It's not like he's, getting up in guys' faces on the perimeter when they're taking these threes and they're just hitting them. That's fine. You can live with that. What you can't live with is him making the same mistakes he's been making for the last 2 years, over and over and over again. And when that is coupled with a regression, an apparent regression in his other abilities as well, the things he actually has succeeded at for the first couple years in the league, that to me is very worrisome. Like, we talked about him potentially being a bit of an offensive hub in terms of dribble handoffs. Those have not been good actions for the Pistons this year. Like, he's not doing a good job in the screen game for me at all. It's been really hard to take any positives from these first 5 games. It really has.
So when you look at the way that Duren has performed, and you look at the way that Stewart has performed, Stewart against the 76ers was one of, if not the biggest reasons why Detroit won that game. The energy, the intensity, he gave Detroit 6 offensive rebounds, played really, really good basketball, or 5 offensive rebounds, excuse me, but he's been one of the best offensive rebounders in the league this year. Does Isaiah Stewart have a case to start? I mean, he's averaging 3 points a game. He's not really shooting the basketball, not really getting a lot of touches offensively, but his impact is real. And when you pair it against the way Duren has negatively impacted this team, are we going back to the idea of maybe the Pistons should be looking at starting Isaiah Stewart, not as a power forward this time, but as a center? Is that even possible? Would they even consider it? I don't know. What do you think?
I'm very hesitant on the idea of starting Isaiah Stewart at this point. One, look, for everything that I just said about Jalen Duren, like, I do think you owe it to yourself as a franchise to really see if he can turn it around, like what he can do there. Maybe he is just struggling with a new defensive system. He's a new coach. He's having a hard time mentally. He's still young. Yes, all those caveats you can say. I just think that, like, the upside there is still there. There is just more upside with Jalen Duren than there is with Isaiah Stewart. You know what Isaiah Stewart is. I knew what Isaiah Stewart was halfway through his rookie season. Like, I said, congratulations, you got yourself like a rich man's Ed Davis. And that's what he is. He's a rich man's Ed Davis. He's going to give you good effort on the boards. He's going to play good defense. But he's so limited offensively. And I think that that's really the issue that I have in terms of starting Isaiah Stewart. It's something that goes back to why you acquired way back when, in the year of 2020, why you acquired what's his name again? Oh my God, why am I blanking on Marvin Bagley? Marvin Bagley, like, I tried to scrub those memories from my head. Why you acquired Marvin Bagley, like, in the first place was because you looked at what you had with Isaiah Stewart and you said, this just, with Cade, it doesn't fully work offensively there. I just think that like when you look at what Isaiah Stewart brings, he brings tremendous energy and effort. And if you're starting him, I just don't see any way that you can get that same level of output over the course of a season, and really have it work for your team with his offensive limitations, especially if they're not having him shoot threes. Like we've been very much on the Isaiah Stewart no shooting threes train for a while now, but like I actually think that when you look at how he plays in the post, you almost would rather have him shooting threes at this point in time because he gives you nothing on the interior offensively, like
It
nothing.
just makes sense to have him outside of the paint. I mean, if he could hit 36, 37, 38% from the three-point line, I think I just take my chances with him not being in the paint, opening up space for Cade Cunningham or Jaden Ivey to get inside, because him rolling, he just doesn't have the skill or the hands to make those grabs on the move, on the dive to the rim. He just doesn't have what's necessary, and he doesn't have the athleticism to be a lob threat consistently either. So I think
his offensive board numbers are buoyed by the fact that he misses so many interior looks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's been a big part of that. And also I think there's like the aspect of, look, the reason why we didn't really want Isaiah Stewart shooting threes last year was because it didn't provide spacing for the Pistons offense. Like there was no real spacing gain from that. That's not the issue this year. They don't need Isaiah Stewart to space the floor. They just need him to hit some shots. And if he's not going to be guarded on the perimeter, that's actually fine this season because you have other shooters out there. You have Tim Hardaway Jr., you have Malik Beasley, you have Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey. Look, if you take out the half-court heaves that they've shot 3 of them so far this year, those guys are shooting 43% from three on the season. Like the Jaden Ivey three-point shot looks legitimate. So I have no issue with Isaiah Stewart taking threes this year. In fact, I'm a supporter of it because I'm okay with him taking open threes. You don't need him to space the floor in that way. You need him to just hit some shots when they're open, and get you some space on the interior. So, like, yeah, I'm fully on board with Isaiah Stewart actually shooting threes this year. I think this year it makes sense if he's going to be playing center and shooting. It's like Miles Turner. You know what I mean? Like, it's the same thing. So for me, I'm very much on board with that. Do I think he should be starting though? No. And I tweeted out last night, like, if you're arguing that Isaiah Stewart should be starting over Jalen Duren at this point, you're really saying a lot more about Jalen Duren than you are about Isaiah Stewart.
Just some breaking news I'll throw out there as we're recording here. Knicks center Karl Anthony Towns questionable for the game on Friday night. If you're listening to this day of release, Karl Anthony Towns questionable with a sprained left wrist. We're talking about the centers right now. I talked about the issues Jalen Duren has had defending bigs that can space the floor, that can shoot. That would be huge for Detroit if Karl Anthony Towns, coming off a 44-point performance against the Miami Heat, isn't able to go, because he's torched the Pistons before, and I had him keyed in to have a huge game against Detroit if he were able to go. We'll see. Questionable doesn't mean he's out for sure, doesn't mean he's in for sure, but something to watch as we're talking about the center position. But yeah, look, on Stewart and on Stewart starting, I just don't think it's a long-term viable option. And I don't think the Pistons are going to give up on Jalen Duren this early in the season either. So I just don't think it's going to happen. I know there's been some talk on social media about it. I've seen it a lot on my feed, on X, on Twitter, whatever you call it nowadays. I just don't think it's viable long-term. I think Joe Truck did a really nice post on his Substack talking about it as well, and talked about, it's nice to have the energy that Stewart has and the intensity that he brings, but you start asking him to do that for 30 minutes a night for 82 games a season, you're going to see it start to trickle down and down and down, and he's not going to be able to bring that same high intensity level of play that's his calling card. And that's why I've said for forever, Isaiah Stewart's a great energy big off the bench. You start asking him to do that every night, and he already has his limitations. We've talked about him, right? His ability to play in the pick and roll, give you stuff offensively. Like, he just doesn't have it. The Pistons haven't asked him to shoot a lot of threes yet this year either, so he's not giving you that floor spacing that he theoretically could give you. I like Isaiah Stewart for what he can give you off the bench. I just think you would be stretching him too thin, and you would start to see his effectiveness wear down as time goes on if you're playing him 30 minutes a night as your starting center. I mean, you're talking about having him go up against Joel Embiid when he plays, Karl Anthony Towns, Bam Adebayo. Like, there's a lot of bigs in the Eastern Conference that are very high level that would be tough for Stewart to go against for 30 minutes a night. I just think he's best served in a bench role. And hey, maybe that means that Detroit has some bigger, larger discussions later on, closer to the offseason down the line when it comes to who their center is moving forward. Certainly, I recall those rumblings right when Trajan Langdon took over that wasn't a huge fan of Jalen Duren. I don't know if those were real, if that was just rumor mill nonsense, but if you like to read into conspiracies and things like that, and you look at how Jalen Duren has played, you might be wondering if his future in Detroit isn't as concrete as it maybe seemed, a year or so ago. So that's really all I have on the centers. I don't think we need to spend too much more time. It's only 5 games, so we've only seen so much from these guys. Jasper, it looks like you have something else you want to add here.
I have a quick question for you. Do you think, because the Pistons have gone through this with Troy Weaver in regards to Saddiq Bey and Bojan Bogdanovic, holding on to guys too long into where the league kind of figures out, this guy's value maybe isn't what we thought it was a year ago when there was a lot of hype around him. Do you think the Pistons potentially move off of Jalen Duren for what they can get, at the trade deadline? Because like we've discussed, he is in line for his contract extension after this year. And if he continues to struggle in the way that Saddiq Bey did, like, it's hard to convince a team to be like, hey, here's this young guy who's regressed his last, this year. He's not playing nearly as well. His fit doesn't seem, nearly as good as it did. His upside seems a lot lower than it did when he was a rookie, setting all kinds of records for a terrible team. Do you look into potentially trading Jalen Duren at the deadline, or do you think the Pistons should play out this year and maybe offer him, a lot lower money than he's probably thinking about getting? Or, because if that's the case and he believes in himself, you're looking at a potential like Greg Monroe situation where he's signing a qualifying offer.
Yeah, I just don't know who's running out there to trade for him. Is a contending team trading for a 20-year-old big that's coming up on a contract extension, contract eligibility, that's largely struggled defensively and probably isn't playable in a playoff situation, at least in a high number of minutes? Is there a young team that doesn't already have a big on their roster that they're working with? I think of Utah with Walker Kessler. I think of Atlanta with Onyeka Okongwu. I think of the Grizzlies now with Zach Edey. Like, I just don't know who's running out there to trade for him. So I just don't know what Detroit gets. Like, do you go back to New Orleans and say, hey, can we get Brandon Ingram? Is it what does it take with Jalen Duren to get Brandon Ingram? I don't know if there's a deal there, but like, I'm trying to find a team that desperately needs a big. I mean, New Orleans is definitely the team that stands out the most there. But Jalen Duren has to prove he's capable of helping an NBA team, or you're not going to get anything in return for him. And if he's proving that he's capable of really helping an NBA team, then you probably also want to keep him because you don't have a great center option on your roster outside of him. So it's a tough situation for Detroit. I think they need Jalen Duren to start playing better to get any sort of clarity and to just help their team right now because they need him. They need him bad for what he can bring to the table, his rebounding, his lob catching. Like, you talked about it. Like, last year in his rookie year, like, the Pistons got a good amount of offense, getting him in pick and rolls, finding ways to get him the ball, at the rim, on lobs. Cade Cunningham did a really good job at that. It just really hasn't panned out yet this year, and it's caused him to kind of slip into this nothing role offensively where he's not really doing anything, and maybe that's hurting his intensity. Maybe he's losing his focus because he's not touching the ball as much and isn't getting as many shot opportunities, and maybe that's a part of this issue. But nonetheless, the Pistons have to figure some things out at center. Quickly here, before we look ahead at the schedule coming up, just wanted to get your thoughts on JB Bickerstaff's rotation so far this year. He's gone 9 deep. He's Marcus Sasser played 3 minutes on opening night and has not been a part of the rotation since. He's used the same starting five all season: Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Tim Hardaway Jr., Tobias Harris, and Jalen Duren. He's used Isaiah Stewart off the bench with Ron Holland, Malik Beasley, and Simone Fontecchio. But that's it. We haven't seen Paul Reed this year. Marcus Sasser's getting no minutes. And they've been without Asar Thompson and Bobby Clintman. So we're seeing a 9-deep rotation from them this early in the year. I mean, what have your thoughts been? I'm personally not against it. It shows how little they trust Marcus Sasser to give them some ball handling help, something that this team desperately needs. But I haven't hated Detroit just running the 9-man rotation, although I still think I'd like to see some Paul Reed minutes. I think he could really help them.
I don't know. Paul Reed looked really overmatched in the 7 minutes that he did get on the court. Like, talk about a team that's struggling with rebounding. Like, he's just undersized, and they don't really have the other players on the roster to help him out with that rebounding. So I think for me, that's certainly something I worry about. I've been a fan of JB's rotations. Like, I think that I have no real issues with it, to be completely honest with you. Like, he's done the things that we've wanted him to do. He's been staggering the Cade and Jaden Ivey minutes. The only reason Marcus Sasser even saw the floor at all, the only reason they even played one all-bench lineup this year was because Jaden Ivey got 2 quick fouls in the first game of the season against the Indiana Pacers. That's the only game that Marcus Sasser played in. So I think for me, like, I have no issues. In fact, I would say I'm pretty happy. There's been at least 2 shooters on the floor at all times in every single lineup. He's done a good job of staggering those minutes, giving guys little blows here and there. Like, I like one of the things that he does is, he'll play Cade Cunningham for the majority of the third quarter, bring in Jaden Ivey towards the end of it, play them maybe 2 minutes together, take Cade off the floor, let Jaden Ivey run for a few minutes in the fourth quarter, like 5 minutes, and then bring Cade Cunningham back on to close it back out. Like, I like how he's been staggering those minutes with the two of them. You're getting a good amount of time with them together in different situations. Like, you're getting times when they're on the floor against starters. You're getting times when they're on the floor against backups. I think it's been pretty good. Yeah, I really don't have any issues with it. Like, the guys who should be playing are playing. He's working with the tools he's been given. He's not forcing any square pegs into round holes, which is something that Monty Williams did way too often last year, where he's giving guys that, like, shouldn't be on the court way too much time on the court. There hasn't been any of that with JB. And frankly, like, this is a team that should be running a 9-man rotation. If they could run fewer people in the rotation, I think they would probably. Like, they just need Ron Holland out there to eat up some minutes for 15 minutes a night right now. When they get Asar Thompson back, I'm very much looking forward to seeing how he utilizes those minutes. I think that's going to be that's when, like, the JB Bickerstaff rotations, I think, get interesting. Because we don't really know what we're going to be getting from Asar Thompson in terms of shooting. So how do you stagger those minutes properly? Like, I can't imagine that he's just going to play him in the same role that Ron Holland is getting right now, right? Like, I don't think you're playing Asar Thompson for only 15 minutes a game. So that will be definitely very, very interesting to see how he works in Asar Thompson into the rotation as well. Like, are we going to get him minutes at the 4? I don't know. I saw somebody say maybe play him at the small ball 5. I love Asar Thompson. I don't know if I see that one being a legitimate possibility at this point in time. That would be interesting, but no, I'm not really seeing it. The thing that I'd be interested to see when he does return is, like, what does Jalen Duren's rebounding look like? Because I think Asar Thompson is a really good offensive rebounder. He's a guy who can go up there and get boards, who can rim protect a little bit. Like, I'm interested to see the effect he has on Jalen Duren. But yeah, as of right now, I'm loving the rotations, to be honest with you. I have no complaints.
Yeah, I just was curious. I think it's such a difference from what we've seen in years past from Pistons head coaches. A 9-man rotation as strict as JB has run it, and as on schedule. I mean, it's the same thing every night. It's when Jaden Ivey's coming out, he's coming back in, and Cade's coming off the floor. Tobias Harris is pretty much tied hands with Cade Cunningham's in terms of being on and off together. So it's been really, really consistent, which I like. I like a coach where I know what I'm getting. He's not just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. But at the same time, the only thing I'll add here is JB Bickerstaff before the season said that they were going to try a lot of different lineups and a lot of guys are going to play. And you may see some, nights where more guys are playing and, the minutes are more spread out. And we just haven't seen that this year. So maybe that's because he thought he was getting Asar Thompson back and he hasn't been back yet. Maybe he thought Paul Reed was going to be more of a factor. I'm not sure, but
I wonder also.
Consistent.
I also wonder if Bobby Klintman would have figured into that rotation as well. Like that.
So
I don't think so at this point in time, but I don't know. Ron Holland has been not great. I wonder if Bobby Klintman was there, if they would have considered playing him a few minutes, but I probably doubt it. He's really playing with a tight rotation right now.
Yeah, I couldn't see it. I think Klintman is going to spend a fair amount of time in the G League this year. So looking at how, strict JB's been with the rotation, I can't imagine Clinton getting minutes over, a Paul Reed or anyone like that. So that would be tough for me to see. Looking ahead at the schedule for Detroit as we wrap up here, they've got the Knicks on Friday night. If you're listening to this the day of release, if you're listening to it after, they've obviously already played New York, and then they've got Brooklyn on Sunday, the Lakers on Monday. I'll be at the games on Friday and Monday. I won't be at the away game in Brooklyn. Maybe Jasper's got to go. I mean,
I was going to say, I will. I am planning on being at that Nets game. So
here we go. So we'll be at all the games in some capacity over the next 3 games, but maybe some chances for Detroit to pick up a couple of wins here. I think the Knicks are definitely beatable if Karl Anthony Towns is indeed out. A big if, but if he's off the board, the Knicks are very thin at the center spot. I think that presents Detroit a huge opportunity to maybe steal one at home.
Definitely. It's still a very tough matchup for them. I still think that is with the wing depth that the Knicks have, that's going to be a tough matchup for them. Miles McBride, Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, OG, they have some real weapons there. I do think it's a far more winnable game with Karl Anthony Towns not on the court. Maybe this is a Jalen Duren get right game because they're going to be throwing Jericho Sims at you. Boy, if you can't win the matchup against Jericho Sims, then we're really, kind of getting into panic mode only 6 games into the season. So I definitely think that's a winnable game. It will be a tough one though. And because Jalen Brunson is just, such a beast. And if they can get some good perimeter shooting out of their guys, I think they can have a chance to kind of beat you up on the inside with Jalen Brunson drives and then kick it out to the perimeter. And that's going to be one of those games, especially where taking care of the ball and winning the 3-point battle. I think that is going to be a huge factor for Detroit against New York. The Brooklyn game to me is you got to win that game. You kind of have to win that game. I just don't see a good excuse for why you drop, even though it's on the road. I don't think there's a good reason to drop that game at all. Brooklyn is a team that should be looking up at you. They are on the downswing. You are supposed to be on the upswing. These are the kind of games you should be winning, even as a limited team like the Pistons are. And then with the flying LeBron Jameses, I think they're going to lose that game. I don't think they're winning that one. We said Jericho Sims is you should win that matchup. Anthony Davis is a good luck with that matchup for Jalen Duren. That is going to be a really, really tough one for Detroit. I really like and I hate to say it because, I am in my heart of hearts a hater. JJ Redick's been doing a really nice job with that team, and I just think he's going to have a scheme that is going to be pretty airtight against the Pistons, which is just, like we said, such a limited roster. I'm wondering if you see it any other way. The way I'm looking at it is like I think they got a 50-50 shot against New York. I think they are like a 75% shot against Brooklyn, and I think they got about a 25% chance against the Lakers, and I'm maybe even overstating it there.
Yeah, Brooklyn's definitely the game that, you look at the schedule and you try to find wins. Like, that's the game Detroit has to win. And if they get lucky enough where Karl Anthony Towns is out for New York obviously already missing some other guys. Like, you're at home, you'd really like to beat them. You're rested, you have a day off in between the games, so you'd really like to win that. And then, look, I'll be seated. I'll be seated for LeBron. I had to go see him before his time's up. I had to see him in person. I don't know how many chances there are going to be left to do that. So I had to take the opportunity. But Detroit's just not winning that ball game. I'm sorry. The Lakers look really, really good. I think JJ Redick's done some really good things there. I mean, he's unlocked Austin Reeves to, I think, a new level. Obviously, Anthony Davis is a very noted destroyer of the Detroit Pistons, and he has been absolutely on fire to start the year. So I don't know how Detroit contains him. I mean, maybe the only thing that changes the game is if Isaiah Stewart gets LeBron ejected and just, rehashes the battle from what was that 2 years ago now? So
2 years ago, yeah.
That's the only thing I can think of. Maybe the complexity changes, but no, I just don't see a world where they beat the Lakers. But I will be seated for
I'll say this though, like if they come out of this next three games, if their record is at 3-5, 8 games into the season, I'm gonna look at that as like, okay, that's good. To me, that's like a positive step forward. It'll make you be like, damn, if only we could have closed that game out against the Pacers.
Exactly.
But like, I think if you're 3-5 when you're looking at the first 8 games of the Pistons schedule, I think you're very happy. I know you got lucky with like no Karl Anthony Towns, no Embiid, no Paul George. Even then, I think you have to be pretty okay because they had their moral victories, but they actually have a few other real wins on there as well. I mean, and look, like we said, like you should beat the Sixers without their 2 best players. You should beat the Brooklyn Nets. I think you should remain very competitive and have a good chance to win against a New York Knicks team without their starting center, without Karl Anthony Towns. So like, if you're winning the games you should win and you're fighting in the games that you shouldn't win, I can live with that as a Pistons fan this season.
The frustrating thing is when you looked at Detroit's schedule at the start of the year, you said, okay, they're going to start off 0-6 or 0-5, and you're or 0-5, 0-6, whatever. You're sitting here at 1-4, and you're still mad, even though you knew it was going to be this way. But it's because of how Detroit played those games. They had Indiana beaten. They had Boston beaten. They had Miami beaten. And they gave away all 3 of those games. Really, the only game that they really, really lost was the Cleveland game. And they even played Cleveland, who's looked like maybe the best team in the league this early in the season, 5-0. They played Cleveland very tight for most of that game as well. So it's just that they've played good enough basketball to win some of these games that you had marked down as losses. That's what makes it frustrating. That's where, hell, even if they are 3-5, you're thinking, damn, this team could be 4-4, 5-3. In a perfect world, they're 6-2 if they would have just done the job and finished teams off when they had the opportunity to. But I think a huge opportunity for Detroit. You have to hope the confidence from the Philadelphia win reigns over into some momentum against the team you're probably amped to play against in New York. You know the crowd's going to be there. You know you're at home. It's a Friday night. You know that energy is going to be there. And if you get them without one of their best players, one of your biggest pain points, like it's just a huge opportunity. So we'll see how Detroit comes out of these next 3. There's probably one more game before next podcast next week on top of these 3. I don't know who they play next Wednesday. I'd have to go back and check, but they'll play 4 games likely before our next podcast. So we'll have a whole nother 4 games to look at and see where Detroit's at after that. But Jasper, we've covered a lot of things in about as tight of an hour as we could possibly have done. Is there anything else you want to add on here before we take this one home?
Well, I'll say that the team that they're going to play on Wednesday is the Charlotte Hornets. So that's another winnable game. Um, I'll say, I mean, hey, if we're talking next week and the Pistons are 4-5, consider me thrilled. I still think even if they're like 3-6 after that stretch, I'm still going to be happy with where they're at because as we've discussed during the offseason, as we've discussed so far this year, they're not a good team. And I think that we just sometimes need to have those expectations. The reason they didn't close out the Pacers, reason they didn't close out the Celtics, is because those are good teams and you are not a good team. And that's what good teams do. They steal wins against teams that are worse than them when they get outplayed. And you're not that team right now. So look, that's okay. Like it's all about the positives right now and taking whatever you can. There definitely are reasons to be concerned as we've gone over with Jalen Duren. But I do think last night's win was a good step forward for this team. You don't want to overreact to one win, but that was a good one for you to get. And hopefully they can string together a couple more. I mean, shoot, if they can go on a 3-game win streak going into that Lakers game, you got to be feeling really positive.
Well, as we wrap up here, I want to again call out hitting that subscribe button, hitting the like button, hitting the follow button, wherever you're watching or listening to the show from. It really, really helps us, and we appreciate that support. I'll also call out our Substack, palaceofpistons.com. It's our website. It's free to subscribe to. All you've got to do is go to the show notes wherever you're watching or listening to the show from. Click on that link to palaceofpistons.com and type in your email. It takes all of 30 seconds. It's going to get you all of our content sent directly to your email inbox without you having to do a thing after you have typed in your email and hit the subscribe button. Again, free to you, helps us tremendously as we grow and bring you content each week. We have Mike's Weekly Drive that comes out every Monday that just kind of recaps some news, notes, and other things surrounding the Detroit Pistons on a weekly cadence. I'm usually bringing you something on Wednesday. This week I talked about the much highly anticipated game against the 76ers, the need for the win, and what the reaction might have looked like had Detroit dropped that game. And then on Friday, you're going to get the podcast sent directly to your email inbox. So you don't got to go on Apple. You don't got to go on YouTube. You don't got to go on Spotify and try to find it anywhere on there. It's going to be right in your inbox waiting for you. I have some other content coming as well. I'll be at Motor City Cruise Media Day next week on November 7th. That's Thursday. So definitely we'll have some coverage from there as well. But we need your support. We need your follows. We need your likes. We need your reviews. All that stuff tremendously helps us, and we greatly appreciate it. That is going to do it for this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast. Wishing you all an excellent rest of your day, and we will see you guys next week for another edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast.